Put this on the thing. So we're going to be doing things with the vortice of the hands to do with the shoulder today. So if you prefer to do that elevated, grab your chair or something to put your hands on wherever you're going to be comfortable, because sometimes doing this stuff on the ground can be a little bit challenging for the wrists. So if that's you, grab yourself a work top or a bit of sofa or whatever it is that you need for putting your hands on. And I've probably gone and lost mine, so let's have this as our prop. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, so starting as we usually do, just with the knees bent and the soles of the feet into the ground. And just that practice of allowing the body to come down to ground. Feel the ground underneath you and let the bones just rest in the hammocks of the fascia. And just take a moment to just let the cogs stop whirring. So let the toes lengthen out from the ball of the foot, snooker ball heel actually. The toes are lengthening away from the snooker ball heel. We're looking for that gap in the center of the foot between the snooker ball heel into the arch of the foot and then space. We're looking for that long waist of the foot, a length between the snooker ball heel and the balls of the feet. And that the more we can lengthen the feet and soften the front of the ankle back, the longer the true waist gets at the lumbers, so between the ribs and the top of the hips. And we just roll the feet onto their outer edges and then onto their inner edges, which just helps the sit bones to find the ground. But we're also looking for that broadness on the inside of the pelvis, that broadness between the iliac bones, the hip bones. Funny. Just feeling that softness on the inner and outer edges of the ankle. Let the snooker ball heel roll. We start to feel that as movement within the lower leg compartment. So maybe slide and glide in the calves, maybe slide and glide around the shins. We've got bones and muscles that are supposed to move there, so we're looking for that. And that will take you all the way into the back of the knee. So just notice if there's anywhere a bit stiff or sticky. And then we're just going to bring the hands onto the front of the hips. And we're just going to pull down on the outside of the left foot. And the hips stay very heavy on the ground, sit bones heavy on the ground. So we're thinking about that uninhibited lumbar curve. It's not so deep we can drive a bus underneath it, but it's not the spine pulled into the ground either. It's that nice neutral pelvis. And the long little toe side on the left side pulls the knee out to the side, not to the point where it interferes with the pelvis though. And then the big toe joint and the inside of the heel just pull the knee back to center. And then we can test that on the other side. So it's looking for the leg just articulating or moving from the hip. This also helps us to really feel that the foot is the main driver for movement of the leg. And that we've got feet that can move independently of the shins, shins that can move independently of the thighs, and thighs that move independently of the hips. So if we just test this out on one side to the other, it might not be a big movement. The knee might not get very far before the hip starts to get dragged along with it. And that's okay, because we've got our hands on the front of the hip bones. And just the weight of the hand is just an encouraging downward force to keep the hips on the ground where they should be. So when you reach the edges of the movement, you know, where the knee is going out to the side, and at some point it's going to run into resistance. So can we pull down with the opposite foot? Can we let the opposite side of the hip get sunk into the ground? Maybe that gives us a little bit further range, but it's an interplay between improving the range, maybe moving past that boundary line just a little bit, but without sacrificing the integration of the leg into the deep waist. You should feel this on the inside of the hips. You should feel this on the inside of the waist. For some of us, we'll feel it all the way up into the underside of the ribs. Because it's like there's a rope that's laying, and it is like a twisty rope that's laying on the inside of the hip bones, and then that threads all the way up the inside side of the spine and blends into the big sheep balloon muscle, which is the diaphragm. So it's a little bit like, you know, rope connections to the top of the legs. And they all get involved in this spirally movement. This changes the way that we walk when we start to imagine these legs that are very much attached to the inside of the hips and the inside of the spine, and the whole lot capped off by the diaphragm. So as we come up through the ribs, we're just going to take the arms up over the body. And again, just taking a little bit of time with the shoulder blades. And the jaw. So we let the jaw drop back into the back of the head. We let the collarbones feel like they can start to slide off the edges of the shoulders. So we're feeling like somebody's got hold of our fingers and pulling them up towards the ceiling. So when we breathe in, we can take the fingers up towards the ceiling, and when we breathe out, just relaxing the arms back through the shoulders. Let gravity take them as much as you can. We want to do as little as possible. We just want to let the arms just fall back. And they start to reconnect a little bit more to the shoulder blades. And we start to connect a little bit more to the broadening that's happening on the front of the chest. so that pointy parts on the base of the front of the ribs as well, the costal margins, we start to breathe into there. We have a tendency to breathe very, very much in the upper parts of the chest, and the lower parts of the lungs get a little bit forgotten. So can we just reintroduce the breath into those spaces? It's deeply relaxing when we do. Might encourage a softening at the solar plexus. And we're just thinking about the spirals of the arms. So if we turn the palms up towards the sky and feel like we've got heavy weights in the hands, I always think of it like balls, you know, the balls that you play pétanque with. They're always full of, we had plastic ones in the garden that were full of water. Sometimes they're full of sand, but there's a good weight to them. There's tennis ball sized ball that is nice and heavy, and we're just imagining that in the palms of the hands, and it helps to draw the arms back down or encourage them back down towards the earth again. So we find these heavy tops of the long arm bones, you know, there's a rotation to be had here. So if we find the pointy part of the elbow and swing the pointy parts of the elbows down so that they look towards the thighs, but we can also let the pointy parts of the elbows swing out to the side as well. So that 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position on a clock face. And it's interesting just to take the elbows through this range of movement, because there's a massive rotational movement available to us at the top of the arm bone as it leads into the shoulder socket. But a lot of the time we can get a little bit stuck in certain tracts of muscle there. So the tendency is to use the side of the neck, top of the shoulder, the bicep on the front of the arm, and then straight down into the index finger and the thumb, which is fine because that's quite a strong part of the arm. But the middle finger, ring finger, and the little finger and the back side of the arm often get a little bit forgotten, much maligned bingo wings, as people like to call them. But we start to favour the top line of the arm over the underside line of the arm, and then we run into trouble because then we get bingo wings. And whilst yes, there is movement in the soft tissues on the back of the arm, which, you know, we would call that the skin and the adipose lay down, or the fatty layer, as it's quite rudely called, because it's not, there's a lot of fascia in there too. And yes, that is subject a little bit to gravity, but what we're really interested in is the triceps underneath. Because when the triceps start to go a little bit baggy, then we are disengaging ourselves from the side of the ribs and the side of the waist. So we can trace the long little finger side down the back side of the forearm to the pointy part of the elbow, and then down the back side of the humerus, the long arm bone, into the underside of the arm. So straight through that axillary process, that deep underarm, and there's lots of nerves and lymph and, you know, blood trunking and all sorts of stuff going through there. So this connection is a vital connection for us. And then it connects through the underarm into the side of the ribs, and then, as I say, down into the obliques, and then down into the pelvis. So we've got to think about our arms as not finishing at the shoulder. They form the casing that will encase your whole chest and the corset of the waist and the pelvis. and of course the head as well, but let's look downwards for a moment. Your arms are buttoned in at every vertebrae from the back of your head to the back of your pelvis. So arms can free up or lock down the spine as we choose. So we're finding that nice sporadic movement. The next time the elbows look back towards the thighs, just taking the right index finger knuckle and just letting that draw up towards the sky. And then feeling the long little finger side doing the same. So we want the long little finger side to pull up towards the sky as well. And it's quite subtle, but you might just feel the different connections. When we point with the index finger up to the sky, you can feel the top of the shoulder. If you point the long little finger side up towards the sky, you might feel a subtle lift in the back side of the ribs on that side. So between the index finger and the little finger, we're just going to let the arm, and you can do one arm or both arms, see how you go. We're thinking about that scarf. We were talking about it last week, weren't we? The scarf of the arms as they come into the shoulders and they wrap around the back of the body. So we're feeling that scarf. So yes, the hands are going towards the top of the mat, but conversely, while the hand goes in one direction towards the top of the mat, the long arm is going back through the shoulder, and in the opposite direction, it's being drawn down through the shoulder into the ribs, into the side of the waist. So there's a lengthening that happens in the side of the ribs and in the underarm. So when we move in this way, you might find that the arms don't come as far up towards the top of the mat as you're used to. And that's fine. You might run into some stiff and sticky stuff, because what we want to do is leave the ribs on the ground. So notice when there's shifts in the ribs, notice when there's shifts in the pelvis. Notice when we deviate from the course. And, you know, when we run into stiff and sticky muscles, you've sent the command to the brain that you want the arms to go up over the head. So now it deploys all its compensatory movement patterns to get you there. So we're looking to notice where those come in. There's nothing wrong with them. We just don't want them to be habit. So notice if you get to a certain point and the elbows start to drift out of the eye line out to the sides, because that's a deviation into a different muscle firing sequence. Notice if the palms start to change orientation, maybe the hands look up towards the sky rather than the palms facing each other. Notice if the shoulder blade starts to lift or the collarbone starts to get involved. It will be your unique compensatory pattern. So, you know, as we've talked about before, it's almost like rolling one of those cine films, and we're going through it frame by frame by frame by frame into the movement, and we keep checking ourselves on each and every frame. But if we find that we get to a frame and things have changed for us, maybe the spine is lifting off the floor. At the rib area, maybe the elbows, as I say, dropping out to the sides and disconnecting the arms out of the shoulders. Maybe the arms suddenly got very heavy. It's another sign of disconnect. Maybe the chin is being pulled back towards the spine and we're flattening the neck out. Wherever we are, we can always rewind a couple of frames, which takes us back to that where we felt there was a state of equilibrium. So for me, I get to a certain point, my left shoulder is way off the ground and the right one is still happily presenting to the floor. Pelvis as well, there's shifts around in the hips as the arms move. Arms are heavy, they're half a stone in weight each. So, and they have a tendency to hang out of the sockets and pull the spine around. So can we be present for that? And we just keep running the course. Long little finger sides pulling away, which is going to give us, for some of us, a bit of a stretch into the tricep at the back. You know, there's a tendency for things to be stiff and sticky in the underarm where the arm connects to that hole in the side of the ribs, if you want to call it that. Feels like that, doesn't it? Armholes going into the side of the ribs if your ribs were a t-shirt, which they're not. And it's just interesting to see. Notice if your arms do come that far over. Like I say, if they don't worry about it. But if your arms do that come that far over, is there a hand that hits the ground first? What happens when the hands hit the ground? Do we just flop completely and go into splat pose? What are the feet up to? There's a lot going on here. Simple movement, but there's a lot going on here. We just keep coming back to that point of neutrality where the arms can drop through and there's a broadness to the ribs. Again, and just letting the breath come in and be broad. Can we go into the broadness at the base of the ribs with the breath? And we start to feel that the connection of the arms into the ribs takes the ribs up and out of the waist. That broadening and that softening to the thoracic spine, the ribby spine, as the front of the chest gets drawn back to the back of the body. There's a broadening, a real broadening and a softening that happens right across the front of the chest. So go gently with yourself there, because it's a real emotions house in there. So if it feels a bit stiff and a bit sticky, take your time with it. So the next time the arms come up towards the top of your mat, keep them connected back into the spine. So you're sending your arms back to solar plexus. That's their connection. You can draw that in your mind's eye, arm going through that shoulder armhole, as we were talking about, through into the ribs, and it just blends straight back into that V, or behind the V on the front of the ribs. And if it feels nice, we're just taking the long little finger side and letting that long little finger knuckle just be drawn out to the sides and just out and down and round. We can make nice circles here. But we're making the circle with the connected arm. The arm doesn't leave the spine. And it's interesting because there are certain areas of our circle where the arms are going to feel really connected. And then there's certain parts of your circle where there's a real desire for the arms to get pulled out of the sockets. And actually, can we pause there, draw them back through the sockets and reintegrate them to spine again? So remember, we talk about that jellyfish effect, where there's this just kind of ripple effect that happens with the jellyfish. You know, there's a contraction, there's a deep contraction in, and then this lovely expansion that comes from center outwards, and then there's a deep contraction where everything's withdrawn back into the spine, and then that expansion outwards again. And it's exactly the same with our movement. The arms come in towards the spine. There's a deep contraction as the arms feed the spine. And then in response, the spine then feeds space outwards through the structures of the ribs, through the arm sockets and all the way down the arms into the hands. And you feel that maybe the palms can get a little bit more expansive, a little bit softer. Remember, we've got those, they're long forgotten now, but remember, we've gotten those nice weights in the palms of the hands. Particularly as the arms come out, round and down, it's really useful to have these weights in the palms of the hands. Keep sending the arms back to their root, back to where they came from. So we're just going to have one more circle here. And we're just going to bring the knees in towards the chest, give the knees a nice hug, have a little rock from side to side, wake up the back of the pelvis if it's a little bit sleepy. Be careful with your low spine if you've got anything going on in there, because the arms are completely connected to the lumbars. So particularly when we're here and working through these movements, they can pull around in the back of the low spine. Feet go over to one side, whichever side is comfortable for you, and we roll onto the side. Hand comes in front of your chest or your shoulder, and you can push up to sitting. Just take a moment, because we've been down a little while and the weather is warm. Just taking a moment to come up, let everything just rebalance. Okay, and I promised last week, can't remember who was talking about it, but it's their fault anyway if you don't get what we're all about today. So vortices of the hands. We've done this a little bit with the feet as well. The yogis of old used to draw eyes on the hands and the feet, and there is chakra points in here and all sorts of fun stuff. But from a fascial point of view, what we've got is this palmar fascia, which is a lovely big web, of course it is. And we've got this kind of, with the hands, we start to put the hands on either on the ground or on the chair, depends where you want to be. If the wrists are grievous, the shoulders are a little bit up around the ears, elevating the hands will definitely be your friend in this one. Much easier to understand these movements when we haven't got the weight of the body coming through that. So if you're happy in kneeling and putting the hands on the floor, great. If the knees are not agreeable to that, just bringing the hands onto your chair. Elbow orientation matters. So we're looking for the soft part of the elbow to look forwards, and we're looking at the pointy part of the elbow coming back. And it's interesting this way because we spend a lot of time with the elbow sticking out to the sides. And if I come around this way, it changes the shoulder quite significantly, and it changes the shoulder muscle firing sequences quite significantly. When we've got the elbows out to the side, we've got so much more of trapezius 1 and the side of the neck acting out here. Whereas when we've got the pointy part of the elbow and it swings round and looks back, then I'm looking for a muscle firing sequence that, yes, is this top line and takes me through the shoulder into the side of the neck, but also the back side of the arm. I go this way. Come on, elbow, that's it. The back side of the arm connecting into that side of the ribs. And when we've got that connection, and you can do this on all fours if it feels good, be careful with yourselves, but if you swing the elbows out to the side, you'll find that we've got this unsupported ribs and low spine. And when we swing the elbows round and we find that long little finger side, heel of the hand, so that outside ulnar process, the root of the little finger, let's call it that, then this fires this nice sling along the back of the arm, into the side of the ribs, into the side of the waist. So now if we pull down with our little fingers and the elbows looking back towards the thighs, we've now got ribs that we can lift and drop because they're now engaged into that sling round the back of the body. Does that make sense? Anybody utterly lost completely? And it's absolutely fine if you are, because elbows and arms and shoulders are tricky. Tricky things. But again, we're thinking about that.
Cass, I've got a question. Locking out of the elbows.
Oh, yeah. Good question. Good question. So if you would like to come back in a couple of years when I'm writing my dissertation on this. Yeah, locking out of the elbows. So that depends a lot on how many receptors you've got in your type 3 collagen. Really impacts your kinesthetic awareness. So there's an old remnant of mine who can turn my elbow completely inside out, which is a little bit disgusting. It's a great party trick when you're younger. It's not so fun when you get to 60. So the reason that's a great question, Diana, is because when you are very flexible, we could call that hypermobile, and if we took that right to the end of the spectrum, we would call that Ehlers-Danlos. The problem is not so much the flexibility, it's the amount of receptors in the tissues. So we don't actually know where the backstop is. You can't feel the end range of the joint. So the natural tendency, because that's the brain feels the locking out of the joint as, or that end range of the joint, and the feedback from the joint tells us where that point of stability is. And this is why I find lots of flexible people in yoga, because I think we're all looking for something, and that is, where is the ground? Where is the stability? And the blessing and the curse, as I've decided it is for my own journey, not for yours, is that can we be okay in the uncertainty? Because we will never feel the end range of the joint, because it's over here somewhere and it's not healthy. So again, watch for your compensatory movement patterns. Look for your habitual movement patterns. So it may be that here is where feels, where feels normal. But if I really let go into this, you can see, hopefully you can see, Diana, this is where all the issues are. So this is me hanging out in the joints. And what we want to do is be okay with that. That's my habit. So it's like, hello, here we are again. even after all these years, feels vaguely familiar. It's quite nice. But can we then start to play with what would be an optimal end range? And initially that has to be it has to be a considered decision, a thought process decision. So we sit, let's go this way around for a second. So we sit in, can I find the center of the hand behind the knuckles? Can I find the center of the hand in front of the wrist? And let that get pulled down into the ground. That's going to give me reciprocal feedback. As I get pulled down into the ground, remember the tennis ball bounces and it comes back up the arm. So I'm looking at that rotation of the elbow and I'm playing with the joint. And these are micro movements initially, where we're just looking at how much rotation is optimal. And the trick, as far as I can feel at this stage in my journey, is when you can't feel anything, Diana, that's when you found the right place. Because the stiffness won't stop you, because it's simply not there. So the place where I don't feel overstretch in the back line, I don't feel stretched out in the rotation through the forearm, but there's a place of ease. Gary Carter calls it the sweet spot, and I get it, but for those of us that are very flexible and might not have so much receptor feedback, it's a place of ease, but it feels like a bit of a trust fall. It's the hammocks of the fascia are there, but for us it's very subtle. And we, for initially the game is, where is the place where I'm locked out? What does that feel like? Because it's not bad or wrong. What does that feel like? And is there somewhere that's going to be more efficient? So if I unlock the elbow, allow it to rotate, and then allow the long arm bone to rotate. So we follow that line, and the stability comes from having the wrist and the elbow and the shoulder in a feeling that we would call relaxation. It's not collapse, it's a relaxation. But the bit of it that's working really hard is behind the V on the front of the ribs. Does that make sense, Diana? That was a really long answer to quite a short question, wasn't it? It's really important that we talk about this stuff, because for women particularly, and the fascial changes that we go through in each stage of our life, the fascial feedback is different for everybody. You know, if you've met this is very sweeping generalization, stereotypical thing, so take it with a pinch of salt. But when you meet your 70-year-old man on the high street with his walking stick, you know, that's stiff as a board. That's a lot of feedback in a certain way. Whereas when you're very flexible, there's not so much feedback coming through, but that leads us on a path a little bit to destabilization, because then we're hanging out in the joints a little bit more. We lean on the bones as a scaffolding rather than having the tissues being that supportive structure. This is good. So again, if you need to elevate your hands, get them up off the floor, then do. Hello, you. We're thinking about the sling around the back of the whatever the big things in the middle of your body are called. Ribs. There they are. So we're looking at the slings of the arms. The shoulder blades come together on the back of the body. We want to work with those muscles that contract and move the shoulder blades towards the spine. So when we're here, we can draw a line from the nose back to the back of the head. We can draw the jaw back into the back of the head. And we start to feel we've got that sort of slightly nodding dog element to what we're doing. Can we touch in with the inside of the neck? Behind the tongue, behind the voice box. If we let the features rest back enough into the back of the head, we might feel that there's a broadness in the back of the head. And we're remembering that the back of the head is connected all the way down the back of the neck to between the shoulder blades. So our head is long. We've got a long head. And we start to see that this part of the spine from sort of T7 between the shoulder blades all the way up into the back of the head, that is the head. So we've kind of got this lollipop head. Is that the right way of calling it? Maybe something like that. But the head's got this long piece of spine that is integral to it. So the game is, and it is a game, as we let the eyes and the nose and the jaw come into the back of the head, that gives us this separation at the base of the skull and the top of the neck. We can imagine the 7 cervical vertebrae in there. Can we just get a little bit of space? So as we've got this kind of wobbly head that's extending away towards the wall in front of us, that might just let the shoulders drop a little bit and soften. It might let the shoulder blades come towards each other on the back of the body a little bit. Notice if one hand is heavier into the ground than the other. And then from the center of the palm pulling down into the ground, can we imagine this lovely passageway through the wrist, through the forearm, through the elbow, through the long arm bones, passageway through the shoulders, and feeding back to the spine again. So as the hands get pulled down into the ground, the ribs lift. And it might be one ribby vertebrae at a time. It might be a bit blocky, and that's fine. You get one vertebrae at a time in about 10 years, so set yourself a set yourself a realistic. Initially, we're just looking to see if we can visualize and start to wander around in the thoracic cavity inside the ribby space, you know, with our mind's eye. It's one of the gifts that we got with our prefrontal cortex, that very new part right at the front of the brain, the ability to be introspective, so we can make a little version of ourselves and just go wandering around inside the landscape of the body. So can we do that? Can we be on the inside of the back of the chest and have a look at the spine bones and the ribs as they connect into those spine bones, and just cultivate those as sort of an image of softness and spaciousness. And you can do this on elbows if the wrists get grievous. You know, don't stay, you won't win. So if the body doesn't want to do it, then don't batter yourself into it. Hands can go on the chair. You can do this on elbows. Give yourself a break. And we just come in and out of it. Take a break. Child poses here to support you. So take time out, take a couple of breaths, shift your focus into your breathing. We get very caught up in the head, particularly when we're trying to achieve something. Oh, I'm going to take a big spoonful of that for myself. We get very caught up with what we're trying to achieve. So can we drop out of what we're trying to achieve, leave it alone for a second, and then come back in again? You know, when we're in a learning process, we want to drop out and come back in, drop out and return to it, leave it alone and come back to it. So these spirals that are coming through the arms can lift the ribs, but they can also let the ribs return back to their neutral position. And in some cases, maybe soften a little bit in the other direction. And again, notice how the shoulder blades can shift out of the way for rising ribs and can draw back together again towards each other on the back of the body for falling ribs. So eventually we end up with this kind of oh, it's like MasterChef, isn't it? Carolyn has made a deconstructed cat pose. But it is a deconstructed cat pose because now we find that when the nose draws back into the back of the head, we can start a process of lengthening into the neck spine. When the hands get pulled into the floor, we can start a process of spaciousness in the ribs, which will lift the ribs up towards the sky, which then draws in behind that V of the ribs, which then draws into the low spine. and the tail kind of gets tipped off the cliff of the pelvis at the back and drops down into the heels. So we start to be able to touch in with and eventually start to work with each individual vertebrae. In one direction, and then if you're feeling smug and you want to take it back in the other direction, it's a big pull down through the big toes, front of the ankle, inside of the heel gets pulled down. We feel that come up through the inside of the legs and it lifts the tail away. But we're not sagging through the low spine, because the big toes and the inside of the heels support the low spine. So the tail feels like it gets pulled away towards the wall behind you. And there's a lengthening that happens to the inside of the spine. There's a lengthening that happens at the inside of the ribs. So it's not just a sagging down towards the floor. We're extending through the spine. Everything's getting sent away and sent away through the inside of the ribs, through the inside of the neck spine, up into the crown of the head. So it's a body-wide event. And then when we reach the end of that, wherever the nose and the jaw stop, it's almost like a swing. The nose and the jaw go out in front of you, and then there's a point where they're happy to swing back in to the back of the head and start the whole process again of lengthening away through the neck. And we're going to run into sticky things here. And we're going to run into compensatory movement patterns. If something doesn't move, something else can. So just noticing parts that we're skipping over. Noticing parts of us that are working really, really hard to compensate for other parts of us that are not working very hard at all. This is good. So we're going to just rest back into our child pose. Let the sit bones stay high when you lengthen back. So we want that nice sliding back of the pelvis on the runners at the top of the legs. We want sliding back of the ribs at the runners at the top of the arms. And just lengthening forwards with the fingers, like someone's got hold of your fingers and they're pulling you forwards, but you're drawing back. I always imagine this like I've got the chocolate in my hand and someone's trying to take it off me. It's that two-way reciprocal movement of lengthening out but drawing back in at the same time, so the shoulder blades don't leave the back of the body, so that the arms are still connected to the spine and the spine's still lengthening down to the tail, even though the arms are going forwards towards the front of your mat. And then just bringing the hands back in. Going to come back up into our square pose and come round into sitting. So again, just using your, or finding your sitting position, have a sofa behind you or cushion underneath you, whatever feels comfortable. We're not doing too much with the legs, so just have them wherever feels nice. And we're just going to rub the hands together just to help them feel tingly. So if anybody wants to know how to be a master at yoga, We all need to be able to do this at appropriate times throughout the day. She's been up, she's eaten, she's hooved it around a bit, and she's going to pass out. And I think this is a good recipe for life. So, tingly hands, you can feel it. And what we're thinking about is that gross move to subtle move differentiation. So when we stretch the fingers out, we can feel, we get a big stretch in the finger processes. There's not much going on in the palm of the hand. So bringing your index finger and just pressing very lightly in the very, very center of the palm. And we want to encourage this place behind the knuckles and in front of the heel of the hand to just open up, so it feels like that place where we're tapping. You might be able to feel that as a vibration up into the elbow, depending on which tendon you're tapping on. But we want to encourage the opening of the hand to happen from the center. So it feels like the back of the hand a little bit is coming through the palm of the hand. And it's a funny feeling because the fingers can relax a little bit, but the hand is still expanding. And just feeling that that can just keep going and keep going. And if we stay with this feeling of expansion in the deep center of the palm, what we might start to feel is that there's a spaciousness that starts to happen at the elbow. And you might find that there's some jiggery pokery, as a technical term, going on up in the shoulder. It takes a minute, so stay with it. And I get this one because when I first learnt this with Gary quite a few years ago now, I was sitting there like, what the hell's going on here? Not sure I can. I'm stretching, I'm not sure I can feel it, but it's it will come. It will come. But we keep feeling that we've got this expansion at the palm, and that will take us down into the shoulder, and the shoulder blade gets drawn in towards the spine a little bit more. We might find that the collarbone continues on its little journey, and we start to run into muscles that are working too hard. So you might find that there's things in the forearm that are a little bit stiff and sticky and turn out to be a little bit achy after a while. So we're going to close that hand. Just notice how that feels. We rest that on the leg. Notice how that shoulder feels compared to the other one. If you want to really test it, you can take the arms up over the head and see how they feel. And then you all just chose your favourite side. So this is the not so favourite side. Because this is how we are. So again, start with that big stretch into the fingers. It's good for the brain to feel that gross movement, the part of us that we go for first. And then if we stay with that outstretched fingers, and then just relax back from that edge just a little bit. And then a nice tap to the center of the palm. Like I say, you can twang the tendon in the center of the palm. You can feel it. Take you through the forearm into the elbow. Helps the brain re-establish the connection between palm and shoulder and spine. And then can we just stay with that hand? And can we extend out from the deep part of the palm at the heel of the hand? And the palm starts to open. And again, just staying here and letting the tissues respond. This is a practice in itself. Can we sit in a place in the body and wait for it to respond rather than us trying to force a response? You know, we push and pull our bodies around all the time, thinking that we need to drive the response. But actually, the body can respond for itself when we give it the conditions to do so. We have to get out the way. But if we can really work with this practice, what we find is a little bit like the inside, you know, when you take the back off a watch or you take the back off a clock, and you can see all these amazing cogs. You know, clocks on the front can be quite boring, just the hands go round and round, but when you take off the back, that's where the magic is really going on, and there's all these cogs interacting with each other and in a constant state of adjustment and movement. And the fascia is just the same. It's always in a constant state of adjusting these micro movements. And it's in these spaces that we can see it, or at least connect to it and get a sense of it. So if we stay here long enough, yes, the palm is doing what it's doing, but eventually we do get drawn up that passageway of the palm into the forearm. And then we start to feel that the tissues at the elbow start to shift and respond, and the tissues at the shoulder start to shift and respond. All from just a question of, can we expand the palm a little bit more? Feels like the back of the palm is coming through the front of the palm. This is good. And then we're going to let the hands come in. We're going to give the shoulders a nice roll. And we're just going to let the crown of the head go up towards the sky, nice lengthening out through the neck. Remember that as the head goes up, it's drawing everything out from behind the heart center. You can take the chin to the chest. And breathe into the smile at the base of the back of the ribs. And then the breath out drops the shoulder blades down the back of the body and returns the head back to center. We'll do this once more. Just taking the chin to the chest. And then that nice breath into the base of the ribs. And then coming back to the center. Just taking one ear to the shoulder. Get a nice stretch out down the side of the neck. Coming back to center. Taking the other ear to the other shoulder. And again, just noticing where you run into restrictions. Keep the arm drawing in through the sockets. The tendency is the head goes one way, the shoulder gets sent another way. Give us a nice stretch into the sternocleidomastoid, so we get quite enamored with that, but can we leave the shoulders in and for the head to move around freely? This is good. One more shoulder roll. We're just going to take the arms up over the head, have a nice stretch through your body. And then we can take the legs out in front. And then we're just going to come back to the center, give the fingers and toes a wiggle. Make some nice rotations with the wrists and the ankles. Give the hands a nice shake out. They've worked hard today. Take a moment to check in with yourself. Notice how you feel. Notice how your breathing feels. Good. It's been a pleasure as always, lovelies. You've worked hard today. A lot of brain work. Brain tired, body relaxed is what we're hoping for. Thank you so much for joining me today. See you next week. Thank you.
Can we have a quick chat?
Yes. Bear with me a second.